Hello and welcome to this special episode of Return on Wellness. I'm your host, David T. Stevens, and I am sitting here with Executive Chef George.
Executive Chef, yeah.
All right, well,
Chef
congratulations
George.
on the Executive Chef title.
Thank you very much.
Everyone has to say yes, chef, when you scream in the kitchen, right?
Yeah, even if they don't like it, they got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's part of the perks, you know.
All right, well, we're going to talk a little bit about the food and beverage program here at Canyon Ranch. We are sitting out here in the redwoods. There might be some planes that fly over or some overly exhaust motorcycles that go down Skyline.
Or Porsches.
Or Porsches.
Yeah.
A number of things.
Yeah.
So bear with us, but we got mics on, so we should be able to make for a good episode. So we're going to spend about 15 minutes here chatting about food and beverage here at Canyon Ranch and what makes it special.
Yeah.
Let's start with how you ended up here, because everyone's journey is a little different, and and I'd love for people to know how you ended up here.
Yeah, my journey started like most chefs, culinary school, and working around, staging. And I was offered a position to open a kind of like a Japanese restaurant attached to a little spa in San Francisco. It's called Onsen. And that kind of sparked a little kind of little bug in me about nutrition and working out and being healthier and eventually I heard about Canyon Ranch and I heard that there was a property here, so I reached out. They reached out and we kind of just it was a good fit. I eat a lot of vegetables. So.
I think a lot of people may not know to connect the dots between the Japanese cuisine and being attached to a spa. That seems like, well, okay, why would sushi be at a spa?
Right.
So you want to elaborate a little more on what that means?
Yeah, well, first of all, our term for spa is, what we picture in spa in Western countries is pretty standard for onsens in Japan. So they have a big bathing community. In Japan, they do a lot of steam, a lot of communal bathing, and most onsens in Japan have a small restaurant attached to it. And obviously, being in Japan, it's Japanese food. But also, Japanese food is usually much cleaner. It's focused more on the quality of the ingredients rather than the technique, or not the technique, but what we add to the ingredients. So it makes for a cleaner dish and I say overall healthier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So that triggered your interest in that type of cuisine.
Just kind of clean cooking, local cooking. The Bay Area, we're known for locality. The farm to table, it's a little overdone nowadays, but we started it. California did Bay Area, so it's kind of the standard. And I felt like I could have brought what I learned at the onsen and to Canyon Ranch here on the property. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about what the process is building a meal here. One of the things that got my attention was when we were talking about planning this, the Sky, who thank you for having us, Sky. She sent me an Instagram reel about you talking about something called computrition.
Yeah.
Can you explain to the viewers exactly what that is and how that integrates into your meal planning process?
Yeah, so computrition is kind of like the hidden hero here. We all, as chefs, we all have ideas of dishes, and the process for us for making dishes that fall within the Canyon Ranch standard is, first of all, we need to cook a good dish. So I have an idea of a dish. Maybe let's say it's going to be, let's say, waffles, right? Or
I had the waffles this morning. They were delicious. Okay.
And so I had this idea, and I go into Computrition, which is basically an app that we use that calculates the nutritional values of each dish and builds the recipe for us. But we have to input into Computrition the recipe that we have, and that means we got to insert every single ingredient that's going to be in a recipe. Now, if the ingredient is not in Computrition, then we have to look for the nutritionals of the ingredient, and we usually do that through the USDA. Or
okay, all right.
Or if it's a prepackaged vegan substitution, we could always look at the package itself and enter it. So if it's just egg mix, for example, we could look up that and put it in, and we could sub it for eggs. But back to the other stuff. So we add every ingredient. We make the recipe in Computrition. Once I'm happy with a recipe, I'll what we call cook it, and
so like a test cook?
Like a test cook. We'll test cook it, but also before we even test cook, I call it cooking, but in Computrition, it spits out the nutritional values.
Got it.
So now that we have the nutritional values behind the dish, I'll print out it and I'll cook the dish itself, and I'll taste it, right? And so if I think the dish is off, but it hits the nutritional values that we're going for, then I go back to competition and try to sub out certain things so that we can maintain the standard but make it a little bit more flavorful. So it's a process of back and forth per recipes.
Now, when you say maintain the standard, what do you mean by that?
So we have a nutritionist for Canyon Ranch overall that gives us a standard. So he gives a certain amount. Each dish has a certain amount of protein, carbs, fat, calories, sodium, and so for us to put a dish on the menu, it has to hit certain values of that. So what does that mean? Example.
You knew exactly what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
I love
So
it.
for example, a breakfast entry, it needs to have between 300 and 500 calories, right? Between 40 and 60 grams of carbs. It has to have more than 20 grams of protein, less than 10 grams of fat, under 750 milligrams of sodium, and more than 3 grams of fiber. So that's what we play with for each, just for specifically just breakfast. So
right, that's breakfast. I'm guessing throughout the day, each because there's meal service 3 times a day,
yes,
and that so there's probably a goal calorie range that is in there,
yeah,
and then each meal service has those goals
yeah.
across the dishes.
The way it's designed is um, each meal is about 750 calories if you partake of an item per category. But we also have snack stations that are also within our standards. So that's also designed depending on the guests. If they're a more active person, they need more calories, or they're less active and don't want too many calories. But there's always options for food everywhere on the property.
Yeah,
Um, and we're on top of just being nutrition, we're also trying to showcase to the guests that nutrition isn't boring food.
yeah.
We try to do cool dishes at dinner. We try to do kind of like a three-course tasting. Of course, the calories per dish is much lower, so it's between 100 and 200 calories per course. But
Per
for
course, but you're getting 3 courses.
3 courses, right?
Yeah,
So yeah, I mean, obviously,
that's my favorite way to eat. I would rather eat more things
yeah,
than a lot of one thing.
yeah, it kind of gets you taste more.
Yeah,
It's a little bit funner, right? And we don't shy away from desserts also. Now of course every dessert that we serve portion is much smaller, um, but a certain amount of fiber in each dish.
I think there's I don't know how we got to this point where like that the one I always go to is like Cheesecake Factory when you get
Yeah,
a portion. Like
yeah.
this is this is family style for one person. You get like a pasta
Hmm.
dish and it's
Hmm.
like a pound of pasta.
Yeah.
Nobody needs that.
No, that's enough for like maybe 2 days.
Yet you could just set it on the table and everybody has some.
Yeah.
I don't know how we ended up there, but I think the the state of health in the United States is reflective and
Yeah.
indicative of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think besides the fact with a dessert, if it's good enough, like yesterday at lunch, I had the chocolate mousse, and it
Yeah.
was I don't
A
know,
little cup. It's like
yeah,
a
it was
little.
tiny,
Yeah.
but there was so much flavor in
Hmm.
every single bite that you didn't want to keep eating it. You had 3 4 bites at the most, and you're like I am just completely satisfied
Yep.
and good.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about going into the test. How does how has that impacted how you've trained the line and because we were talking a little bit beforehand about like, oh, you try something and oh, it's a little dry, just add some butter,
Mm.
do this,
Yeah.
but then when you're figuring out what the macros are and then communicating what the macros are, if something's dry, you just can't slap more butter in it
Yeah.
because you're going to throw the whole calculation off.
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is educating the staff, the cooks, that there's a reason why we can't do certain things, right? There's like, hey, we can't just add butter because it adds a lot of fat to it, and it's not in the recipe, right? We're trying to be transparent to our guests, and what's in the numbers. We're trying to be true to it as much as possible. Um, so it's about thinking out of the box. Instead of maybe, oh, and we need butter, maybe we could add, you know, maybe we can add a little salt here and there, but not too much. Or we can add a little minos, but all within what the recipe is demanding, right? So it's just been a change of culture. I think we all come from backgrounds where it's just add butter, add cream. And right now it's more like We can't do that. Just make sure that we understand how to cook the dish well, and we weigh out everything that we do, and just taste it. Like if something's off, then call a manager over and we could look at it and fix it.
Yeah.
But the recipes are the recipes.
Yeah, I think now has that impacted the the overall process? Because like I'm someone who meal preps every week,
Yeah.
and so I'm sure that surprises a lot of people. Um, but I feel like the prep process has to be a lot more stringent than like instead of using, which I'm not against, but instead of using a handful or these loose measurements, are you guys measuring stuff and like
Oh yeah.
really down to the T of
Yeah.
grams and whatnot?
Yeah. All recipes are down to ounces, grams, teaspoons, and tablespoons. Ideally, everything's to grams, but sometimes the USDA does not give out those measurements in grams. It's kind of weird, but metric system's great. But
Anybody who's used MyFitnessPal knows that that's just how it is.
yeah. But yeah, so everything that we do, we always measure it out. We have measuring spoons, and we pre-portion a lot of stuff, especially for service. We pre-portion, we weigh out our proteins. But yeah, it's about making sure that the prep is standardized. At most restaurants, I think there's always one guy that does the steaks a little bit bigger, one guy that's smaller, or one guy serves a little bit more soup. Here, it's about training them to make sure that they're all on the same page.
So let me ask you a question. When I was in, I was here for dinner last night.
Mm-hmm.
When they're doing soup,
yeah,
do they put the bowl on a scale and measure out before it comes out?
No, we have a measuring spoon. We have a ladle that has an ounce amount.
Okay, so that makes it easier.
Yeah. Instead of having to, we just boom. So a lot of stuff that we measure out with the scales are usually the flours or batters that we add to dishes. But when we're on the line, it's kind of tough for us to kind of just like pop out the scale every single time. Right. But we have measuring spoons.
Got it. So yeah. Okay, and then this can also benefit groups. I want to confirm a rumor I heard yesterday because I asked someone who I don't think works in the kitchen about a food and beverage question. So now I get to confirm or deny.
Okay.
If you have someone coming who has specific macro requirements that they're supposed to hit each day, are you guys able to? This is obviously potentially an extreme case.
Yeah.
But I think some of the other properties are probably more familiar with it. It sounds like you guys are able to accommodate that if you have people that are supposed to hit certain numbers. And by the way, for anybody unfamiliar with macros are, why don't you tell them?
Well, macros are just, how do I explain it?
It's like high level macronutrients. So it is calories,
it's carbs, fat, fiber, sodium, and
protein.
Protein, the main one. The main one. Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah.
Don't worry about
it. Yeah.
So if somebody comes in that has specific macronutrient requirements, is that something that you guys can accommodate for? They're like, I have to hit 2,000, or there's the other end of the spectrum, right? Like there's someone who's a bodybuilder and they're like, an elite athlete that's like, I need 3,000 calories a day. I need 250 grams of protein. I need blah, 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 blah. Can they advance that to you guys? And
yeah, absolutely. We have a really great kind of reception team that will capture all information before a guest comes on property. They usually reach out and be like, hey, is there any special needs? And usually it's more of a dietary, but we've had some athletes, some 49er fans out there, some pretty important players come out here and stay for a couple of days and have some specific needs. And we cater to them. We definitely make sure that they're getting enough protein, enough carbs. I think it was off season, so I don't think he was consuming as much. But if I had to guess, because based off what they do,
he ate all the desserts.
Yeah, but also if you have a specific like a Mediterranean diet or 100% gluten free, or does not consume corn syrup and stuff like that, which we don't produce or we don't have in general, but stuff like that we could accommodate. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. I think the last thing I want to call out is the fact that on the menu, and I love the fact that this is an optional experience.
Yes.
All the macros are listed, but like sometimes when you go to a meal or if you're on vacation, you go somewhere and you're like, I really wanted that, and they put the calories on it and it ruined it for me.
Yeah.
In the dining room, when you sit down, you're presented with a menu, and the menu is macro free.
Yes.
But there's a little QR code where you can go investigate.
Yes, I think we all know QR code came very popular with COVID.
Yep.
You know, and
I'm
it's
just, I might just start calling it the COVID code instead of
yeah,
QR
yeah.
code.
That I mean, yeah, I didn't know until COVID happened, right? But yeah, we had a lot of guests that you know, wellness has also just moved from um, you know, restraining people from eating to encouraging people to eat. You know, it's fuel, and so we've had a lot of guests that had that complaint before where they felt restrictive because they saw the calories. You know, and that is also one of the pillars that we're working on here is also spiritual wellness, right? And so we decided about a year ago that we were going to have the information available, but not at a first glance. And on this property specifically, we haven't had much issues with that. I know that the Tucson property has been around for a while. Um, it's something different for them. But we also have always the printed menu with calories on hand if somebody does not care for QR codes.
If they
Yeah.
lean all in, and just
Mhm.
are like, I'm putting my phone in my safe and I'm
Mhm.
walking away.
Yeah.
I mean, I have zero signal here,
Yeah.
so if it weren't for Wi-Fi, my phone wouldn't even work.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it's also we're a retreat. We're trying to get people away from their day to day.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that's it. Thank you, Chef George.
Yeah.
Really
Thank you.
appreciate
Yeah,
it.
no
This has been
problem.
awesome.
Yeah.
I can't say I've been. One of the things that really struck with me is we talked earlier. When I worked at 24 Hour Fitness and I ran their internal events,
Yeah.
I was trying to find a caterer that would show up and, along with the food labels, put all the macros on it,
Yeah.
so that the we had people that were athletes and or aspiring bodybuilders or whatever,
Hmm.
so that when they served, they knew what they were getting in their meals,
Yeah.
and it was impossible. And I was like, but this was, I don't know, 2012, so it was a different
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
But from the looks of the software, that might have been when it was written, anyways.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's an
but
outdated, but
it's out there.
yeah.
So I think, as us as planners, if this is something that is important to your group, go out there, find it. I've found at least one place so far where this exists, here at Canyon Ranch.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's one of our pillars. So
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Chef
awesome.
George.
Thank you. All right. Cool.
That's
So,
it.
all right. Cool. That was easy.